All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Cooperating Raleigh College's first professional development workshop in our mini-series. My name is Mara DeCola, and I'm the Executive Director for CRC. We are thrilled that you're joining us today. Today's workshop is titled Taking on Neodiversity on Campus and is being presented by Dr. Rupert Nacoste. Dr. Nacoste is a native of the Louisiana Bayou Country and an alumni distinguished undergraduate professor of psychology at North Carolina State University. During his time in the service in the U.S. Navy, to deal with its serious racial problems, the Department of Defense trained him and others to be a facilitator of racial dialogues among sailors. From that point on, adding academic degrees, Dr. Nacoste has worked as a scholar activist of interpersonal and intergroup relationships. His books include Taking on Diversity, How We Can Move from Anxiety to Respect, and his newest book, To Live Woke, Thoughts to Carry in Our Struggle to Save the Soul of America. Dr. Nacoste has been on the faculty at NC State since 1988. In 2006, he created a one-of-a-kind interpersonal relationships and race course, which has become wildly popular. He is the winner of the 2013 UNC Board of Governors Teaching Excellence Award because he uses a captivating oratory style to engage people to see their own role in moments of tension and social interaction. Division 9 of the Academic Psychological Association, the Society for the Psychological Study of Social Issues, has named him the winner of their 2020 Outstanding Teaching and Mentoring Award. Today, working on a college campus is a high-wire act. Colleges and universities are no longer segregated into only one type of student with one type of background. College students today are a neodiverse mix of backgrounds and experiences. With little training, staff of those colleges and universities are expected to have productive interactions with people, that is, students who are not like me. That can cause an anxiety about how to interact. That neodiversity anxiety can get in the way of the professional work staff are trying to do their best to do. This workshop is designed to give participants strategies for dealing with their own neodiversity anxiety in order to do their jobs, living up to the high standards for productive social interactions they set for themselves. After participating in today's workshop, you will leave with a clear definition of neodiversity, a clear understanding of neodiversity anxiety and its effects on social interaction, 5 tips for interacting well in neodiverse social encounters. Well, and thank you so much, Dr. Nacoste, for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Maura. Screen share. It's there. Okay. No. Oh. There we go. Good afternoon. My thanks to the Raleigh Cooperating College Association for setting up this workshop that allows me to talk with our college communities about the interpersonal, intergroup issues we are struggling with as a nation and that impact every one of us and the students and colleagues we interact with. I have the long view. I have been working on interpersonal, intergroup issues since my time in the United States Navy, 1972 to 1976. I do indeed have the long view. In that long view, I can see that we are at another important transition point in dealing with intergroup issues in America. We as a nation have gone through other transitions. Before my time, we had the enslavement of African people, then the emancipation to Reconstruction, onto my growing up time of Jim Crow legal racial segregation, onto desegregation, onto conversations about diversity, now conversations about diversity and inclusion. Right now, we are in the newest stage, neo-diversity, an interpersonal situation in which we all have to encounter and interact with people who are not like us on some group dimension. people who do not look like, sound like, believe like, or love like us. In that neodiversity context, the co-occurrence of the COVID-19 social isolation and the very public murder of Mr. George Floyd has created what I call a COVID-19 woke effect. America has been stunned into a new awareness of the sometimes brutal intergroup dynamics that have been a constant in the lives of African Americans, cutting across all the group identities of American culture. That new, startled awareness has activated a hunger to understand and to do something to help end racism. That is where I and my concept of neodiversity can help people find productive ways of thinking and acting in this new intergroup context. My book, To Live Woke, is centered on the concept of neodiversity, that new interpersonal situation of America in which we all have to encounter and interact with people not like us, people who do not look like, sound like, believe like, or love like us. With stories from my life and my teaching at North Carolina State University, To Live Woke is set up in 46 short essay chapters. I wrote and crafted it that way because there are so many us versus them topics that connect to our nation's neodiversity situation. I also put it together in small bits to give the reader psychological space to pause in, to reflect and process these topics that we all know cause tension. We must continue the work to rid our nation of systems of racism, sexism, heterosexism, religionism, all those systems supporting individual prejudice and bigotry. Yet that is not all we must do. We must also work on interpersonal bigotry in our everyday lives. That is to say, we also should be talking about addressing and confronting the bigotry that occurs in everyday social interactions. In my book, To Live Woke, I say it this way. Some of the same people who call out somebody else for being a racist turn right around and engage in gender bigotry, or engage in bigotry toward people with certain bodily conditions, or engage in bigotry based on sexual orientation through language use that's so gay, or engage in bigotry towards people with mental health conditions, saying out loud that someone is a retard. Focusing on racism in a person is a dodge. It's a quick move to leave out all the other forms of bigotry in our society. We imply that if we can just stop people from being racist and stop people from seeing color, then that would solve all of the problems of human prejudice in our society. No, it would not. That is why one of the most important questions people are asking in this very hot transition moment in American history is, how can I be of help? Well, to be an ally requires first and foremost self-examination. No matter who you are, no matter how you are trained and educated, you are not all right. You are not all right because of the way you were socialized to be part of this American culture. Somewhere during your socialization, you were given ideas about some group, maybe race, maybe sex or person. A physics teaching professor at NC State says in the classroom to women that women are useless, worthless. Or maybe you were given ideas about religion, maybe sexual orientation, maybe the poet W.H. Auden put it this way: evil is unspectacular and always human, shares our bed and eats at our own table. Whoever you are, to be respectful of others in your role on campus requires genuine self-examination and acceptance of the fact that you are not all right when it comes to having to interact with all kinds of people. There are no innocent. That is why to learn to productively manage yourself in neodiverse social interactions requires first and foremost self-examination of your intergroup feelings on all fronts. If you think I'm good when it comes to Black people, and then a Black transgender woman comes in as a client, will you really be all right? Would you be all right when a hijabi Muslim woman sits in front of you? It's also important to know that neurodiversity anxiety is widespread in America. Today, for our learning and thinking about neurodiversity and neurodiversity anxiety, let me read from my book, To Live Woke. You see, I have become a herald for neurodiversity. Let me read a bit of chapter 45, Neurodiversity in Appalachia. Since 2006, I had been saying, lecturing, writing essays and books to herald that America is in the midst of a struggle with its neurodiversity. Everywhere in America, all across America, people are trying to understand and manage neurodiversity, this new interpersonal situation in which we all have to encounter and sometimes interact with people who do not look like, sound like, worship like, or love like us. There has been no better confirmation of that for me than my being invited and hired to be the lead instructor for the Appalachian College Association's 2019 Summer Teaching and Leadership Institute, June 3rd through 7th. When I got the first email, I had never heard of the Appalachian College Association. I found out that, quote, the Appalachian College Association is a nonprofit consortium of 35 private four-year liberal arts institutions located in the Central Appalachian Mountains in Kentucky, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia, end quote. Why did this association want me to lead the institute? In their first email to me, after describing the theme of the Summer Teaching and Learning Institute as diversity and engaged pedagogy, they said this: with your recent book, Taking on Diversity, as well as Making Gumbo in the University, and basically the way we see your life's work, teaching us through social psychology how to relate to one another more meaningfully, you are the perfect person for this role. Diversity and engaged pedagogy. Diversity and engaged pedagogy. I hate the word pedagogy, by the way. Pedagogy is just teaching. Pedagogy is, of course, teaching. The association's full description of the 2019 Summer Teaching and Leadership Institute said this: the changing landscape of higher education has many of us thinking and rethinking about what it means to be an effective educator with an increasingly diverse student body. The diversity we encounter in our classrooms ranges from identity-based diversities such as race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, class, and the various intersections of identity positions, to diversity more broadly defined, such as learning styles, college preparedness, and neurodiversity. Engaged pedagogy, they say, is a powerful tool we can harness to address the diverse needs of our students as we create spaces that transform boundaries into freedom. So having learned about the content of my book, Taking on Diversity, and learning of my reputation as a classroom professor, the organizers were especially interested in my work on neurodiversity in the classroom and on college campuses. As the description of their motivation indicates, those small 900 to 1,200 student campuses were beginning to realize that in every classroom there are people with different visible and invisible group identities. They realized that their teaching was less effective when they did not take into account the neurodiversity mix of their classrooms. My job was to lay out strategies for their teaching in a neurodiverse classroom. I spent a week at Emory and Henry College leading college professors through teaching workshops and workshops on facilitating difficult conversations. I had a good time with this group of college professors and instructors who teach in Appalachia. Humbled I was by their openness and reactions to learning about neurodiversity. A last session where participants revealed the impact of my time and work with them really hit me. I came in thinking that this would be an interesting experience in Appalachia. Halfway through the week, and certainly by the end, I was truly excited. I began to realize, you see, that with a group of college professors from 15 or so different Appalachian colleges, those professors learning about an engagement with the neurodiversity idea would now be rippling out into the whole of the Appalachian College Association campuses. I have become a herald of neodiversity. Before Appalachia, I was at Shippensburg University in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. I have become a herald, so I have been traveling a lot. Shippensburg was one of those places where I was going to give a campus-wide talk at the end of the day. Before that, though, there were some interesting moments. You see, I never know who I'm going to meet and interact with on these trips. Here is a random encounter at Shippensburg. The Shippensburg mascot just happened to be walking the hall in the building I was in, and I said, I have to have a picture. The mascot is Big Red. But what did I actually do while I was there? Well, here's my description of my work at Shippensburg from chapter 44 of my book, To Live Woke, called, I have been traveling to colleges and universities proclaiming the age and dynamics of neodiversity, finding out about my idea of and my work to herald the coming of neodiversity and the challenges that neodiversity presents. Calls come to me. Why? Public colleges and universities, through immoral laws and sometimes law-like customs, used to be segregated by race and so did not admit Black people or Latinx people. Some also segregated by sex of person, no women allowed. With segregation by law eliminated, that means students and staff and everyone who walks onto a college and university campus come onto university campuses that are struggling to write that history of discrimination, to increase their diversity. In that changing social environment, using the word inclusion, colleges and universities are struggling to figure out ways to help students from different groups interact with each other with respect. Toward that end, most colleges and universities make some, at least general, vague statements about being a diverse and inclusive place. Lately, some of those institutions are realizing what those messages are up against. Those messages are bumping into a mix of intergroup ignorance and arrogance, walking the campus, especially among new students. Young people are coming out of a world where other people, adults, pretty much controlled everything for them. Before coming to college, their activities and friends were mostly controlled by parents, including the frequency of their interactions with people not like them, people from other groups. At college, those social controls are gone. One of my students, who admitted struggling mightily with being on our neodiverse campus, wrote this: "When I asked my parents a few weeks ago why I was never heavily exposed to other races as a child, they called that lack of exposure protection, but I now call it ignorance." Unaware of their own limited intergroup experiences, young people walk onto a neodiverse campus unprepared, carrying in their social psychology a mix of intergroup ignorance and intergroup arrogance. They hear messages of diversity and inclusion from the college or university that they do not fully understand. Intergroup ignorance. Hey, why are you so angry? What did I say? Oh, I didn't know spick was a racial slur. Intergroup arrogance, brought from home. I can talk to anybody any way I want to. I can say what I want about them. My parents say they shouldn't be here anyway. When that intergroup ignorance and intergroup arrogance comes out in interpersonal behavior, when that bigotry goes public, things happen. A gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender campus center is defaced. Racial graffiti is painted on a college campus walkway. A group chat filled with words of anti-Muslim sentiments, of hate and demeaning views of women goes public. Somebody at that college or university has seen a video of one of my lectures on neodiversity. Somebody there has read my newest book, and I get an email helping us at Yavapai. Request for possible assistance, Shippensburg. October 21, 2018, I traveled to Shippensburg University to do that neodiversity thing that I do. That thing is simple: to help faculty, students, and staff see that we are no longer dealing with just race relations. To quote the poet Sterling Brown, if you are on the train thinking only about race relations, then you need to know this, that this is the wrong line you've been riding. Asking me about the state of racial relations in America is asking the wrong question. It turns out the intergroup issues burning the fabric of America are not just related to race or gender or religion or sexual orientation or mental health condition or gender identity or bodily condition or heating up the intergroup social environment of America is people from all those categories all at the same time demanding respect. That is the fire of our neodiversity, that new interpersonal situation in which none of us can avoid interacting with people not like us on some dimension. Whenever and wherever those neodiversity interactions happen, members of all groups expect and demand respect. With their intergroup ignorance and intergroup arrogance, many young people are jolted, shocked, and burned by that fire when they come to a neodiverse college or university with all the different kinds of people and all the messages of diversity and inclusion respect. Just before I traveled to Shippensburg, I asked the question I always ask: has anything related to neodiversity happened recently? Yes, was the answer. On October 1, 2018, someone had defaced the office door used by students advocating for equality, a Shippensburg student LGBT group with sexual orientation slurs. Now I had some sense of the neodiversity tensions on that campus. Now I had a concrete, college-relevant example to talk about with students, on which to give them a new perspective. At Shippensburg, though, I got a unique opportunity. Yes, in the early evening of October 22nd, 2018, I would be doing a campus-wide lecture on neodiversity to help launch the university's new climate survey. But what about the rest of the day leading up to that event? For that time, at professors' request, I spoke and interacted with 4 small classes of students, all of whom were in their first year, first semester of college, with a room of about 15 to 25 students at a time. These were up close and personal interactions. In each classroom, I got the students thinking and talking about their past life situations in which they experienced interaction anxiety, a nervousness about interacting with someone. In various ways, they talked about how that anxiety made them act goofy. Then I pointed out that neodiversity anxiety works the same way. Neodiversity anxiety is a feeling of being nervous about interacting with a person not like you on some group dimension. Could be a Muslim, could be a woman, a person who uses a wheelchair, a Black person, a person who supports the LGBT community and so in your head must be gay, or a person who has probably made it clear to you that they are gay, lesbian, or transgender. Sometimes we agree that neodiversity anxiety makes people act goofy. How? That anxiety can create a psychological push in you to interact using a stereotype to guide how you interact with that person. Sometimes, I pointed out, it goes beyond just acting goofy. Sometimes that anxiety can also push people into bigotry, behavioral expression of anti-group feelings that come out as verbally expressed stereotypes, verbally or written expression of group slurs, attempts to avoid interacting with them. Connecting that to a neurodiverse campus and experiencing neurodiversity anxiety about interacting with someone not like you, I asked the students in those small groups, what skills do you need in those moments to have a respectful interaction with their fellow student? Here's one tip I said: never try to interact with a person as a representative of a group. Why? Because it is insulting to that person. You must understand, I said, that people know the stereotypes of their group. So when you try to interact with an individual as a representative of the group they happen to be a member of, you use a stereotype and they see what you are doing. With that said, I asked, what other social skills do you need to cope with neodiversity? We talked. To keep the points of that conversation on all of our minds, I did something I have not done in years. I picked up a piece of chalk, yes, chalk, and wrote the students' thoughts on the blackboard. To tether us to the 21st century, at the end of my first classroom session, one of my hosts took a digital photo of what I had written on the board. In that first session, we had concluded that these are some of the social skills people need to cope with their neurodiversity anxiety and interact well, interact with respect on Shippensburg's neurodiverse campus. 5 tips we came up with. Never try to interact with a person as a representative of a group. Tip 1, the Shippensburg students agreed with me that this was the most basic starting point because it means don't rely on stereotypes. Tip 1, never try to interact with a person as a representative of a group. Tip 2, go slow. When I let them know that my approach to all that is going on is an interpersonal approach, I inform them that one of the discoveries from social psychology is that in social interaction, self-disclosures should come slowly, as if peeling an onion, and self-disclosures should be asked for slowly, as if peeling an onion. That adds up to the go slow rule for coping with neurodiversity. Go slowly. The students like that. Tip 2, go slow. Tip 3, live with the anxiety. Too often we try to get past our anxiety, and that's when we make it worse. We blurt out an inappropriate question like, what are you? Instead, it's better to acknowledge to yourself you are feeling anxious, and then remind yourself to follow rule 2, go slow, and live with the anxiety for a while. That came from the students. Tip 4, agree to disagree. Agree to disagree. Meeting new people means encountering people with different approaches to living life in the social world we talked about. For example, different political beliefs. Other people have their own social histories and experiences. From their experiences, those other people have already come to their opinions, just as you have. Agree to disagree without being competitive, without feeling threatened, without attacking the other person. In other words, expect to encounter disagreements. Expect to be surprised. Tip 4, agree to disagree. Tip 5. Tip 5 actually combines all of the other tips. Learning conversations. I put it this way. Since on campus and in life you will be meeting a mix of new people, make your conversations learning conversations. How? A, avoid relying on stereotypes. B, go slow. Interact with the intent to learn what the other person is willing to tell you. C, live in the moment. Live with the anxiety. D, agree to disagree. No one is going to change anybody in the moment. So learn how people think without trying to change how they think or what they think. I go over this with my class as well. Learning conversations. Make your conversations learning conversations. A, avoid relying on stereotypes, and avoid relying on stereotype questions, like what do you do for a living? Or coming up to me because I'm a tall black man and asking me about sports. Okay. Don't do that. I never played anything except the saxophone. Try something else. What keeps you busy? How do you spend your days? These are ways of having learning conversations. Again, avoid relying on stereotypes, go slow, live in the moment, live with the anxiety. We will have those moments. We are all human. There are no innocent. And then agree to disagree. No one is going to change anybody in the moment. Another thing I work my students through. You can't change people in the moment. You can express who you are. Speak in the I, not the you, and learn how people think without trying to change how they think or what they think. Not always in the same order, but each small class of students talked about each of these as part of their social interaction skill set they had to work on to participate in their university's effort to build a truly inclusive, that is, respectful social climate. Later on, I did give my general lecture on neurodiversity. 5 tips. Never try to interact with a person as a representative of a group. Go slow. Live with the anxiety. Agree to disagree. Have learning conversations. Have learning conversations. Remember, neurodiversity is not about who. Neurodiversity is a what. Neurodiversity is the interpersonal situation we all live and work in which we have to encounter and sometimes interact with people from many different groups. That's not going away, and it's not in your head. It is a social reality. It is the interpersonal situation of America today. Keep in mind that neurodiversity situation can cause interpersonal anxiety, and anxiety about who are among the we and who are among the they, and anxiety about how to interact with them. As soon as you get them in your head, catch yourself. What you want to figure out is how to interact with this person, because the anxiety, if it's let loose, can activate bigotry. Knowing all that, practice. Practice incorporating the 5 tips into all of your everyday social interactions, but especially your professional social interactions with whomever might be your clients. Learn to live woke. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nacoste. We would like to open it up for some Q&A, and Dr. Nacoste has graciously agreed to stay on and answer some questions. We've had some questions come in to me in the chat. Just a few reminders to everyone. There is a Q&A function. If you'd like to ask a question through Q&A, I will moderate them to Dr. Nacoste. Or if you'd like to pose a question to the group, we have over 200 attendees here today. If you have a question that you'd like to pose to the attendees, absolutely feel free to use the chat function. Dr. Nacoste, the first question that has come in is about tip 1. Does tip 1 mean do not interact with the other person as if they are a representative of a group, or do not act as a representative of any group that I may be a member of? Or
That's interesting. Both? Yeah, that's interesting. What I was talking about is the idea of using a stereotype to interact with a person, that is, seeing them as a representative of a group. But it is also dangerous to see yourself, to categorize yourself as a representative of a group, is that you represent women, you represent Muslims, you represent Black people. That's dangerous too, because you can't. You can be who you are. I'm a mix of things. You see a big giant Black man, but there are things you can't see. I'm a Louisiana Black Creole. You can't see the Creole part. Et toi, c'est bon, laissez les bons t'enrouler. I'm from the Bayou country. You can't see my Roman Catholicism. So we're all a mix of things. So be who you are, that brings that mix together, but don't try to represent. And if people push on you to represent, that means they're trying to interact with you as a representative of a group, which is a problem.
Another question that's come in, is it a sound strategy to expect to find common ground in a group of neurodiversity persons?
Interesting. I think in this American culture, there's always the possibility of finding common ground. When I say common ground, I mean some similarities of interest, for example. but it may take a little while to work out what that is, but that's why you must go slow and not assume it. So for example, people come to NC State and we're all Wolfpack, but that's a very big mix of stuff going on the campus of 36,000 people. So is everybody a football fan? Ooh, no. But that's why you go slow, to discover the commonalities, have those learning conversations.
Dr. Nacoste, will you please discuss the executive order banning diversity trainings and what that means on college campuses?
Ooh. We're not sure what it means on college campuses, but let me back up. The executive order is about a specific use of language in diversity training, it turns out. It's not about diversity training per se, which is really interesting. It seems to be about diversity training per se, but it really was about specific language used in diversity training, like white privilege and so on. Trust me, the military is going to get around that. Why do I say that? Well, what people don't know is that the Pentagon has a huge diversity machinery. What does that mean? Patrick Air Force Base houses the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute. I've been a senior scholar with them. Nobody's going to get rid of Patrick Air Force Base and the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute. So the military is going to navigate that. The question is that you've asked is, what do universities have to do? Colleges and universities. What does it mean for them? Some colleges have already capitulated and said they're going to stop all their diversity training. I think that's a mistake. I don't think the executive order can do that, but that has to be worked out in the courts. Nobody can stop me, for example, from teaching my course, Interdependence and Race. You can't do it. So there's going to be some navigating.
A question came in, beyond individual interactions, what about group interactions? One student recently shared with me that they went to hear a conservative speaker, but was spat on by other students who were there to protest, and the student knew some of those students.
So I'm a social psychologist, and one of the things I warn people about is group dynamics. There are people you may know as individuals, but you can put people in groups and something about the group dynamic can take over. Now, a protest is one thing. Spitting on someone is not protesting. So one of the things that young people have to learn to do is how to protest, and they need help, they need training. I've been talking to my students about that as well. It's okay to raise your voice in protest. It is not okay to try and completely disrupt an event. And so we had 3 semesters ago someone on campus, and a few students came to me, and I walked them through this. They ended up doing it very well. They did not try to disrupt the event, but they did stand in tally and protest and make noise. That's fine. They didn't go up and say, we can't have you here and da 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 da. So the style of the protest, the nature of the event can be disrupted by inappropriate forms of protest. Spitting on people means it's become more than the protest, it's become an outlet for pure anger. And the civil rights movement was filled with training. People don't really remember that. But the civil rights movement was filled with training for protesters.
Dr. Nacoste, how do you instruct individuals not to ignore mistreatment of others while maintaining professionalism and integrity to their work on college campuses? Or what are a few pointers that you can give to not destroy their own progress in the work environment?
Yeah. What you're tapping into there is the leadership issues of the particular unit, and that becomes kind of complicated. So for example, universities, colleges and universities are complex places organizationally. So the president, chancellor, may deliver certain messages, but how is that laid out in staffing of college units? How are leaders of those units trained? And a lot of universities don't train anybody when it comes to that. So the manager is not trained. So you have to navigate this in a way that's, I believe, puts too much responsibility on you. You should be able to, in the best of all worlds, speak up when you see some mistreatment by group membership. But you have to, turns out right now, you have to feel it out for yourself in your organization and develop partnerships with other people in your unit. That would be one strategy. Don't do it all on yourself. If you can, develop partnerships.
Is there a place to draw a line for when agree to disagree is not acceptable? How do you communicate that with students or trainees?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Language. Let's do language. So one of the things I do in my interdependence in the race course is talk about language. The first 2 days of the class meetings, I'm setting up the ground rules for my classes in the syllabus and so on about what kind of language you're going to use and that. So, but sometimes people misinterpret me. They think that they can say things with me because I'm going to go along with it. Like, for example, using the word redneck. And I have to call people on that. If you want to talk about a person's behavior, bang, you can do that. You will not label it in this racially insensitive, racially slurred way. So I cut those, we agree to disagree in the sense that we can talk about issues, we can have different interpretations of issues, but we will not, and that's the line, we will not engage in a conversation where we're demeaning people.
Dr. Nacoste, how would you suggest an LGBTQIA plus member can break free from internalized suppression of sexuality expression in the professional field? And you can view this question in the Q&A as well if you need to, Dr. Nacoste.
Well, I think I got it. What I'm hearing is, you said internalized. So there's some fear of self-expression. If that fear is, it probably isn't, but let's say that fear is purely internal, then you have to start working on yourself, developing your own voice. So that means having conversations with LGBTQ people to talk about your experience and your fears and so on. But usually it's some combination. You're not sure that the social environment will support you. The question is, what are the policies? The question is, who can you talk to in your unit? But at some point, it has to be you finding the strength to voice yourself, which may be risky, but you have to assess that yourself.
Do you have any suggestion on how to address non-respectful comments by students, especially when they mention their right to free speech, which they certainly have?
Yeah, I do. Okay, when they say free speech, ask them this: what does the Constitution say? The Constitution does not say you can say whatever you want. The Constitution says, this is the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law. It does not say that the university can't put restrictions on your language. It does not say that I, as a professor, can't put restrictions on your language. It does not say that the office of whatever office you're working in can't put restrictions on your language. That's how you handle it.
For those who are not able to forge ahead and fight for others, do you suggest a class or a training that would be helpful for them to attend?
Ooh. Yeah, this is coming up a lot. I think there's a lot of different ways people are trying to get themselves educated. I do think, I don't have a real answer to that in the sense of a specific class. I think you do have to educate yourself. So, for example, you're doing it now, you're attending this, you're learning some things, you're getting some resources in the sense of a couple of books you might read, maybe through your church. So I just did St. Andrew's Presbyterian. They're running a series. So look around for these kinds of new community activism forums that are popping up everywhere.
Do you have any examples of success when a systemic diversity issue has been mishandled but later turned around with a cultural shift?
Ooh. I'm not sure I get that. Well, here's the thing. What you make me think of is this, and this happens to my students now. I have my students reading Tim Tyson's Blood, Then Sign My Name. And my students are being educated about the real history of race in America because they don't get the education in their high schools. So students who take my course read Tim Tyson's Blood, Then Sign My Name. And immediately, one of the things they come in saying, especially in this time, is that nothing's changed. And I immediately say, you're wrong. You're wrong. I grew up in the Jim Crow South. I grew up in a time where legally, I could not go to school with white kids of my own age because it was against the law. So don't tell me nothing's changed. So that system has changed. We got rid of that system. What's interesting and troubling right now is there are these hidden systems that we're now just discovering and that we're starting to work on. So we've had successes in the past all along the way. Schools and so on and so on and so on. Desegregation was a big systemic change, but now we still have more work to do. And some of that new work has to do with new groups voicing themselves, LGBTQ people. And so we've had successes. We have to look at those successes and pull from those successes the strategies that worked.
Dr. Nacoste, could you repeat the name of the book you're having your students read and the author?
The author is Timothy Tyson, Dr. Tim Tyson, Tyson. The book is Blood, Done Sign My Name. Blood, Done Sign My Name. It is a story, okay, it's a historical memoir. It's the story that begins with the murder of a Black man in Oxford, North Carolina, in public, in the streets, in 1972, which is right there is a stunning thing. People go, wait, my students are like, that happened in the what? Yeah, but that's how we've been miseducated, or people have been miseducated and misled about the history of race in America. So that book is not only a memoir, it's a history because it's written by Tim Tyson, who is a professor of African American history at Duke University. It's won a lot of awards. It's well written. It's stunning, actually.
Dr. Nacoste, could you quickly review the 5 tips one more time? I think that there are some people who'd like to see them again.
Sure. Tip 1, never try to interact with a person as a representative of a group. So I'm going to stop myself here. I'm going to go through them, but I want to say this to Mara. I can send you a document that you can post somewhere.
Absolutely.
Okay. So tip 1, never try to interact with a person as a representative of a group. Never try to interact with a person as a representative of a group. Tip 2, go slow. Go slow. Self-disclosure should come slowly, as if peeling an onion, and should be asked for slowly, as if peeling an onion. Tip 2, go slow. Tip 3, live with the anxiety. Live with the anxiety. We all have moments of anxiety. And we all know that when we've had those moments of anxieties, the worst thing we can do is panic. It is what I tell my students, use the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The most important advice ever given in the universe, don't panic. Turns out to be true, don't panic. So live with the anxiety. Live with the anxiety. That's tip 3. Tip 4, agree to disagree. Meeting new people, meeting new students, meeting new staff. You're not going to change people in the moment. One of the things we are seeing in our country is very poor models when it comes to agreeing or disagreeing. The models are yelling and screaming, and you're wrong, and I'm going to make you understand that right now. No, you're not. That's not how the social world works. People do not just spring into existence just because they're interacting with you. They already have a social history that you don't know anything about. So agree to disagree. And if you do it respectfully, it can become very interesting. Learning conversations. This brings them all together. Have learning conversations. This is tip 5. Have learning conversations. Make your conversations learning conversations. Avoid types. Sure, okay, you can see my face and you can see my dark skin. Here's what you can't see. Those of you who've never met me. You can't see the 6'3", broad-shouldered combination of variables here. And the idea that when I walk into a room, people have to see me. What's interesting about that is people try to act as if they don't see me, or they go quickly to something to make themselves feel safe. So literally, people always ask me about sports. And it's just annoying. So, no. And they do this knowing I'm a professor. They don't ask me about books. They don't ask me about teaching. They ask me about sports. Have learning conversations, real ones. Those are the 5 tips. They're also in chapter 45 of my book, Take to Live Woke.
There was
but I will send Mara a document that she can post to the Cooperating College's website or someplace.
Absolutely. I'll post the recording to this session as well as any documents that Dr. Nacoste sends to me on the CRC website under staff professional development. Also, there was some questions about where to find Dr. Nacoste's book. It is available on Amazon. And so if you would like to purchase the book, you can. There is, if you just type in the title, it will come up on Amazon.
Whoever his books has copies right now.
Dr. Nacoste, a question came in. Do you think that the advent of the internet age has helped or harmed diversity and integration efforts?
Oh, wow, that's so interesting. So the answer is yes. That is to say, it's all of that. It has certainly helped in the sense that people are connecting, people are seeing different kinds of cultural expressions and all of that. And it has hurt, because sometimes people get angry and they express themselves in awful ways because they're behind a computer screen. So it's a mixed blessing. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. I do a whole lecture in my interpersonal relationships course, the general course, social psychology, about the impact of the internet, social communication technologies, the internet, cell phones, and all of that, and how it has major impacts on social interactions. A lot of them negative, some positive, but the students expressed a lot of negatives. So it's a mixed bag.
Dr. Nacoste, how do you recommend that someone were to manage a situation when you hear coworkers or supervisors making racist or hateful statements or speech?
So each university, I'll start there, but each university's units also should have an outlet for reporting that. And usually those outlets are anonymous. So for example, NC State has a bias reporting system so that you don't have to stick your neck out. You can report something you've heard in a particular space, and then it's investigated. If you want to deal with it in the moment, the strategy is this, especially if the person is interacting with you. Okay, the strategy has to do with a person interacting with you using that kind of language. If people are talking over there, the worst thing you can do is run over there and start trying to tell them to not do it, because then it's just a group dynamic fight. But if a person is interacting with you, you can say, oh, sorry. I'm very uncomfortable with that kind of language. I find it offensive. It hurts me. And then stop talking. That strategy is a scientifically based strategy on the set of very sophisticated experiments, and it works. But the person has to be interacting with you. It's not something that you observe. If you observe stuff, you need a bias reporting system.
Dr. Nacoste, are there problems with addressing race relation problems using ideas like white privilege?
Yes, I have a whole chapter on that until they woke. Here's the idea. What people get really confused about this because I say I don't like the idea of talking about white privilege. People say, well, white privilege exists. I didn't say it doesn't exist. What I said was, it's not a productive way of talking. What does that mean? I was trained as a racial awareness facilitator. So my training, aside from my PhD, before my PhD, is in how to help people engage in productive dialogue. How do you do that? Well, you stay away from things that make people feel immediately defensive. White privilege, what is that? How do you define it? What do you mean? And that's one of the problems, white privilege. So some of my students are coming from rural North Carolina. Okay. They're the first in their family to go to college, and you're going to look at them and tell them that they're white privileged. That's not going to work. But you can say there are no innocent. Notice what I just did. Everybody's got stereotypes that we all need to work on. There are no innocent. Common ground, similarity. I'm not attacking you. I'm talking about us. Oh, so there are problems with white privilege, white fragility. Ugh. Yeah. But they're popular. You know why? Because they're catchy. Actually, there's more than that. Because one of my African American students was very clear about this. I remember this very clearly in the class when I was criticizing the white privilege idea. African American female said, well, how do we let people know how angry we really are? Oh, that's a different goal, isn't it? And I understand anger. I get that. But if you want to have dialogue so you can bring people into a real conversation so they can understand, that's also a different goal.
Dr. Nacoste, what are your thoughts about a diversity office that does not reflect diversity in any demographic, race, gender, sexual identity, religion, and neither of those other protected classes?
I'm doing this because I've seen this. They say the diversity office, and you go, oh, oh, okay. That means it's a cover your ass approach. They want to say they have a diversity office. Okay. This is a problem, a widespread problem. It's a widespread problem. Even universities that have diversity offices where the people who run it look the way you would want them to look doesn't mean it's a diversity office in the way it ought to be in terms of advocating for diversity. So there are a mix of problems with what universities have done in the past. There are a mix of problems with what some of them are doing now. And you're right, that's inappropriate.
At this time, I think we can take just a couple more questions if anyone would like to put them in the chat or the Q&A box. There is a question, Dr. Nacoste, do you recommend any other books on these topics?
Okay. Any other books on these topics? Okay. I'm very careful about that. So I have two. Taking on Diversity and to Live Woke. I recommend Tim Tyson's Blood That Signed My Name for historical background. I am one of the few people who does the interpersonal approach. And it's because I'm a social psychologist of a particular kind of training and because I did this work in the Navy. That becomes harder to identify, to tell you the truth. unless you ask me a question, I'm going to round this out.
The newest buzzword is equity. What does that mean?
Oh, that's not a buzzword. That is to say, I guess it could be seen as a buzzword. The goal has always been equity, but people talk a lot about equality first, and there was reasons for that, because the country was so lopsided when it came to race that we had to push for equality. But equity is what inclusion means. Equity is the idea that a person's talents should be the thing that we pay attention to, their inputs. That's what equity is. So for example, my outputs, my inputs should not be viewed differently because I'm a Black man. They should be viewed as my inputs. Now, there's some really interesting questions around that, because I'm having conversations where people think or talk as if inputs are shaded by style or evaluated by style. For example, how you wear your hair. That has nothing to do with whether or not you're effective, but somehow. So that's not equitable. That's again letting something external get in the way. So you put people in equal positions, but not equitable evaluations because of style, shirt they wear, that kind of thing. I don't wear ties. If that's your big deal, then sorry for you. Look, we've got a lot of work to do. Are you about to ask me a question?
I can. So a question came in: economical status separates us no matter what or who you are. Do you agree?
Economic status? You mean socioeconomic status? Separates us? Not necessarily, no. How we use socioeconomic status separates us. How we let it live in our lives, yes. But, you know, the janitor is a good friend.
Do you feel like universities and institutions are in a place now where they will give those diversity officers and DEI groups the support and authority they would need to be effective advocates?
Do I think they will now? Is that the question? I didn't hear the first part.
Do you feel like universities and institutions are in a place now where they will give those diversity officers and DEI groups the support and authority they need to be effective advocates?
I think now they are pretty much scared to death about not doing something. Now, what they will do will depend on a lot of variables. A lot of variables. Trust me, I've been pushing NC State for a long time. And even now, so this is a better position in the sense of the whole country paying attention. It makes it more possible, but we've got certain problems right now as well, and certain concerns and fears and all of that. So if you have a voice, use your voice. You have a platform, use your platform. Push.
Dr. Nacoste, are we including ageism in the pool of neurodiverse issues that are troublesome?
Sure. Yes. The interesting thing about neurodiversity is once you start writing out the list keeps going. So yes, any kind of discrimination based on group category, or any kind of anxiety based on group category becomes a part of the neurodiversity dynamic, who we have to interact with, how we interact with people. So yes, which is why I said what I said about focusing only on racism and race. Bigotry is the issue. Institutions can support bigotry, and then we have to deal with those isms. But let's also deal with the interpersonal bigotries in our everyday social interactions. And it's bigotry, not just race. So if you got a buddy who says, you know, start making jokes about gay people or jokes about women or okay, that's an issue. or jokes about old people. It's interpersonal from the way I approach it.
Nacoste, there's a question that came in, and I think that they're referring to the question before. It says, what problems are you referring to?
Oh, university problems? Look, universities, colleges and universities are also, okay, this is the way I always say it. Colleges and universities, they're not ivory nor a tower. This is not an ivory tower. Our colleges and universities sit in a political system. So, how they handle their diversity offices is being talked about by politicians. Why y'all doing that? You've seen across the nation politicians attacking universities for having diversity offices. It's trying to strip them of a certain amount of money because they have a diversity office. So that's what I mean. There are real significant problems with what a university is willing to risk. And so it depends on what the social context, the political context is.
And this will be our last question for today. Do you think that it's possible to eliminate bigotry?
Eliminate. There will always be bigotry. That's not the issue. That is, what we need to eliminate is widespread bigotry. There will always be some us versus them going on. There's a thing called the minimal group effect. Automatic categorization into groups with a tendency to compete is cognitive. So there'll always be a tendency towards. What we have to do is socialize our children in a way that they can see somebody being different and not turn it into bigotry. But the tendency will always be in the human condition. That's why we have so much work. We will always have so much work to do. But trust me, I'm almost 70 years old. We can do the work. We already have done some significant work. Now we're realizing what other work we need to do. And the way to do that is to do it respectfully. It is the way that Anna Bontemps talked about us being daybreakers. We are not come to wage a strife with swords upon this hill. It is not wise to waste a life against a stubborn will. Yet would we die, as some have done, beating away for the rising sun. Always beating away for the rising sun. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nacoste. This was an excellent session, and thank you so much for kicking off our workshop series. Attendees, thank you so much for registering and participating with us today, for your great questions and chats. We at CRC, I don't do this alone, and so I need to give a thank you to some of the planning committee members who helped make this workshop possible. A big shout out to Katie Maris at Shaw University, Jessica Craig at Wake Tech, Kayla Beavers at William Peace University, and Valencia Harris at Meredith. Thank you so much for your help in making this possible today. We will have additional workshop series coming up throughout this semester and the spring semester. And so we hope to see you all again in just a few weeks. And we will be sending some more information as that becomes available. So thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Nacoste. We hope everyone has a wonderful weekend.
Take care.